I am Noah Shea, alum and graduate assistant of LaSalle University's Solstice Master of Fine Arts Creative Writing program. Welcome to the seventh. Thank you. Welcome to the seventh in a series of 8 evening readings taking place here in Auburndale, Massachusetts, as part of our January 2026 10-day residency, the start of our spring semester. For tonight's reading, first up, we will have poetry faculty member Jennifer Jean, who will be introduced by poetry student Peter Pizzi. Then we will have fiction faculty member Stephen Huff, who will be introduced by fiction student Shane Patrick Dowling. And we'll conclude with fiction for young people and adults faculty member David Yoo, who will be introduced for writing for young people student Ivy Alphonse Crean. Peter, come on up to the mic.
Hello. Tonight I'm introducing a writer who proves that poetry can tell the truth, hold its ground, and occasionally throw a very good punch. Jennifer Jean is a poet who writes with urgency, intelligence, and a fierce, humane clarity. Her work looks directly at violence, gender, history, and survival, but it never loses its pulse. These are poems that don't whisper, they don't flinch, and they definitely don't ask for permission. She's accomplished in ways that don't always show up on a CV. Writing poems that people carry with them. Saying the thing that's difficult to say and making language feel sharp, alive, and necessary again, which honestly might be the harder job. One of her poems that immediately got my attention from her book Vase is titled, "Don't Pick a Fight with a Poet," which is excellent advice and frankly, relatable. The poem begins with humor. There's a kind of sly confidence in the title, but what unfolds is something much sharper. Whether it be about the physical fight, she writes, "Before she could speak, I elbowed her throat, and she landed flat on pavement, choked out." The poem also reminds us that poets are trained observers. We notice everything. We remember. We don't let language be casual when lives are not. What I love about this poem is how it balances wit and warning. It's playful on the surface, but underneath it's serious about voice. Who gets one? Who's been denied one? And what happens when that voice finally refuses to be quiet? It's the kind of poem that makes you laugh and then immediately think, oh, this is about something real. And that's what Jennifer Jean does so well throughout Vase. She gives us poems that are alive with rhythm, precision, and emotional charge. Even when the subject matter is heavy, the language is electric. A great example of this is seen in her book Object Lesson, where she writes about human trafficking and objectification. There's no preaching, no soft focus, just a poet who trusts the line, trusts the reader, and isn't afraid to tell the truth with style. Jennifer was my mentor during my first semester. What that meant in practice was being listened to, carefully observed, and never rushed. She read with patience, with thoughtfulness, and with a kind of attention that made me feel both seen and challenged. Working with her taught me not just how to revise a poem, but to stay honest inside it. Jennifer's work has appeared in numerous publications, including Poetry Magazine, Rattle, and the Los Angeles Review. Her next poetry collection, The Pacific, is forthcoming from Tupelo Press in 2027. She is also the co-writer and co-translator with Dr. Hana Ahmed Jabbar of a correspondence in Arabic and English poems titled Where Do You Live? She is the recipient of the Jean Pedrick Award from the New England Poetry Club and an Ambassador for Peace Award from the Women's Federation for World Peace. She currently serves as a senior program manager of 24 Pearl Street, the Fine Arts Work Center's online writing program, which is where we first chatted. Please join me in welcoming Jennifer Jean.
Wow, thank you so much. I think I'm blushing. Really happy to be here with all of you and happy to share the work that I brought today. All of it, they're just 4 poems I'm going to read actually. And each poem is from a project that was greenlit in 2025. So I had a really great 2025. And so I just want to share it with everybody. Super happy about it. Peter mentioned this book where the first poem resides. Where do you live? And the poem I'm going to read is addressed to my co-writer, Hana Ahmed Jaber. It's called High Noon. And did I tell you, Hana, American history is wrapped in film. We watch our gunslingers meet when the sun is directly overhead, so the gunfight is fair. So neither man is blinded by anything other than hatred, short-sightedness, ingratitude, ego. Some of us believe in this scene. Some of us believe in their dusty women crying at home. But some of us believe in the fact of a clear sky so blue, 2 bodies can bathe in sunlight, see down the center of a dirt road in a rustic hometown, see for miles, see into the niches and nooks of each other's faces. A miracle. We think this lack of shadow is heaven. And it's only heaven if we've nothing to hide. Let's meet here, Hana, on the original road of this mutual hometown with our translator, Warak. And once we all get used to the terrible discomfort of imperfect understanding, we'll know heaven. We'll know friendship is possible. And it really did come true. Hana is a close friend of mine, a true friend. So the next poem I want to share with you is from, I had the honor of editing an anthology called Other Paths for Scheherazade, a bilingual anthology of contemporary poetry by Arab women. We changed it around. That's why I'm trying to remember the exact title, but Other Paths for Scheherazade. And so I edited that and co-translated some of the poems that reside there. And it is, I wrote the note, 78 poems by 40 women from 11 Arab nations. And that's coming out in February. It'll be if anybody's going to AWP, it'll be there, or maybe it'll be here next year when I'm here. You can pick it up. The poem that I want to read, I co-translated, so this is not my work. I worked with Dima Al-Basha, a Syrian translator, on Imam Masray's poem, In Souls There Are Questions with Wings. Between your patience and a true life, there is an epic, the tattoo of a satisfied whip, tears that clear the fog of nomads who left home on the day of solidity. My soul abandons me a bit when I am shards. It comes back to me a bit after, with an awakening slap that almost takes off the right cheek. In the coffins of a passing dream that doesn't soften except to stand long and proud, damn the life under a sheep herder's rule. How humiliated it is. So I was working on the anthology at the same time I was working on Where Do You Live? So a lot of co-translation going on, but I still was looking for projects. Just, you throw out I don't fish, but anyways, throw out the reel. And then sometimes you catch a bunch of stuff. So another good fortune that came my way was I was offered an editorship of a series called Songs for Ferouz, New Arab Women's Poetry. So it came out of my work with Hana, the co-translation, Where Do You Live? It came out of the Other Paths for Scheherazade. And then I could edit these solo books. And so the first book in a 10-book series, I just knew had to be Hana's book, my good friend Hana. So I also wanted to co-translate it. So I'm kind of crazy. I'm working on so many things, but I finished over Christmas. And her book, Hana's book that I co-translated, is called I Drag My Sorrow by His Collar. It's kind of evocative. And the poem I want to read from that is called, and I co-translated it with Wadak Case, who also worked with me on this book. Poem is called The Diary of a Runaway Drop of Tea. Who taught you, poor thing, that a poem arrives just like that, with a glass and a cadence and a woman? Do you know my pillow's sorrow? When she wants a poem to erase him, you smear him with the lies in your promises. I drag my sorrow by his collar, kick him out of this evening's window, but he surprises me in the pocket of a poem. When your eyes leave me, sorrow sticks to my heart, and the tears of my fingers fall upon the sheet of the poem. When you dress for the job, the poem becomes inhabited by lots of rot. The silver coat of your lies might be worn by other women, but you certainly won't have room for a single poem. Excuse me, sir, please descend from the sky of my poem. All the fig leaves in the world will not cover your stupidities. When the poem's body wouldn't obey him, he cursed most women and went to sleep early. As if you don't know, when you cling to her cold sleeves, that poem aches. Perhaps your hands are unaware you're climbing the shirt of a passing window makes the poem announce his protest and strip the sky from your fingers. I know perfectly well that you won't leave the bed of my poem for fear your fingers will become barren. Since when have you insisted on gifting me a blue poem while I constantly remind my heart you're colorblind? At the end of our encounter, the poem shrouded itself in a pale resentment because it couldn't bear the black of your eyes. Okay. So that was fun. And so as I was working on all this, I had my own, as I was doing co-translation work, I had my own book, 8 years old, 10, I don't know how old it is, 10 to 8 years old, something like that, languishing, kept sending it out, but 2025 paid off. And I got the notice, and Peter mentioned this, that I have a collection accepted by Tupelo Press coming out in 2027 called The Pacific. So yeah. Super happy. Long time coming. So I want to read just one poem from that and then I'll be done. And this has some lines from Dorian Lux's poems, Salt and Snow. And the poem is called A Confusion of Moonflowers. There was this one time I thought Dorian Lux said salt when she said snow. From a stage, she said it was snowing when she got the call about her sister's heart on heroin. Then she said the dead hate salt or salt is life or something. She talked about a confusion of moonflowers, and all I could hear was an echo of being addicted to family, a feeling. I remembered waking in a car confused by infinite hexagons littering a vast pale expanse at the bottom of Death Valley. I was 15 in that car in the Badwater Basin and saw a white that must be snow. I was far from the sea but could taste it. She called family a rush of guilt, a wrong address, and I remembered unbuckling toward a crystalline, a dawn-lit weirdness and other tourists. Signs reminding me of my love of the Pacific, of how high I'd be if I were there. My brother Joe wasn't trudging through that death in the rising heat. He was chilling in our home valley, heating his spoon and smoking his snow for the first time, while I was breathing in and being in the desert. A divergence. I wrote Dorian later, and she wrote back. I'd conflated the salt and the snow poems. I don't know if I wrote, if Joe's alive. I meant every day is Badwater. I keep breathing and being alone. Yep. Thank you so much.
Good evening. Tonight, I have the pleasure of introducing Stephen Huff. I met Steve in my first residency 2 summers ago during the second half of my workshop. Having already heard accolades from the other students, I was pleased to see he lived up to his reputation of wit and gentle repose. He taught me a lot about thinking through the logistics of a story, and it was clear from just an hour or so of discussion the varied wealth of experience in his possession. So it was no surprise to learn from research of his many careers, everything from factories and libraries to cafe singing and driving taxis. It is through these careers he empowers his fiction and poetry alike with the essence of urban American life. Students will know from his classes and evening readings that both he and his work are deeply contemplative, but lower your guard and he might hit you with an outrageous joke or scenario that sends the whole audience into peals of laughter. Steve's first book was a poetry collection entitled The Water We Came From, published in 2003 and praised by poet Sam Hamill as clear, precise, and overflowing with the things of this world and with a deep sense of contemplative dailiness. It was followed by Proof the next year, a 2004 chapbook collection of poems from the Two Rivers Review chapbook competition, where it won editor's choice. In 2007, he released another poetry collection, More Daring Escapes, and in 2008 came A Pig in Paris, selected short stories from his time as a host of fiction and shorts on Rochester, New York's NPR Public Radio. He published Blissful and A Fire in the Hill in 2017, collections of fiction and poetry respectively. But his most recent work is a travelogue dedicated to authors famous and forgotten as he takes readers past their gravesites in remembrance of their lives and influence. It is titled Resting Among Us, Authors' Gravesites in Upstate New York, and was published in 2023. He has also contributed to a slew of anthologies, including Knowing Not, in which he was an editor, and Commonwealth, where he is one of the collection's 103 poets. He is a winner of the prestigious Pushcart Prize in Fiction, and he was an O. Henry finalist. His poetry and short fiction have been featured in literary magazines such as Chelsea, the Hudson Review, and Tar River Poetry, to name a few. In addition to his own works, he is well established in the publishing industry and both the founding editor and president of Tiger Bark Press, a nonprofit publishing company, namely dealing in poetry as well as literary criticism and nonfiction. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Steve Huff.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that warm and generous introduction. I really thank you so much. I want to thank Meg and Quentin and Noah and Ellen and Cassie. But, that's actually not saying enough because I feel I am very lucky to be here. I think all of us are very lucky to be here. I can remember back in 2007 when we were staying in the Gardner house and sitting on the porch with Laurent Beausolar, and she was saying, "We are just so goddamn lucky," she said. I was thinking today. I was thinking today about my old friend Hayden Carruth, the poet, and we used to sit around and talk a lot. And unfortunately he's not around anymore. And one evening we were talking, and I was telling him about when I was a young boy. I had a rabbit named Fletcher, and Fletcher died. And of course I was upset because Fletcher died. It was probably all my fault. And so I had Barry Fletcher, but it was the middle of the winter, so I had to get a snow shovel and a pickaxe, and I shoveled out the spot, and then I got the pickaxe, but the ground was just like rock hard, and I just beat away at the ground. Finally, I got that poor rabbit underground, and then the snow melted, and Fletcher's 2 ears were sticking above the ground. And Peyton and I sat and giggled about that for a while. But the reason I'm bringing this up, well, partly because I'm old and I tend to ramble, but partly it's that we remember things that we use in our fiction a lot, and a lot of the times they're true things. They're true things, and then we redefine them or we reuse them in other situations in our fiction. And there's I knew a woman once. Now, the piece that I'm going to read is the opening of chapter 1 of a mystery called The Death of a Glass Butterfly. And there's something that happens to a woman in this chapter. And the woman I knew is not in this chapter. It's not her, but what happened to her is in this chapter. This is my sleuth is named Hector Candle. He was chased out of New York by the Russian mob, and he set up camp upstate in central New York and tries to be a PI in central New York, which it doesn't work out very well, but it's the only thing he knows how to do anymore. The Death of a Glass Butterfly, opening of chapter 1. I had every reason to believe I had found Felicia Harrow, unfortunately not alive. The tag on her morgue door was unknown 331. I thought how brutally unprofessional of me to have found her 3 days after her death. Although she was an obviously damaged corpse, she still looked like the woman in the photo that I had. Even the coroner thought I had a match. I called her father, Charles Harrow, and he drove down from his house in Sodas Point on the bay. He arrived at Veterans Memorial, highly agitated and glaring at everyone. They pulled out the drawer in the morgue, and I saw his face drop. She was someone's daughter, a hit and run while crossing the street at midnight, but not Felicia. There were sighs all around. Her father and I went from there to the bar at the Silver Slipper in the village of Tyler. It was raining. He paid me off, and he fired me, and we drank ourselves into the floor. Me out of disappointment, he out of, well, a mix of things. Along toward closing time, Charles grew hair all over his face, and we got into a fist fight out in the parking lot. It was over the crappy job I'd done, except that neither of us was capable of landing a solid blow. And we sat together in the back seat of a village cop cruiser while the officer wrote us up tickets for disturbing the peace. I told Mr. Harrow I was going to keep looking for Felicia, whether he paid me or not. Screw yourself while you're at it. Dumb shit, I said. I ripped up his check for $2,200 and threw it in his face. The cop said, "All right, you two." He said he'd throw us both in the jug, but it was already full of drunks from the night before who happened to be undocumented farmhands, now waiting for the federal marshal to come and bust them away. I snorted, "Well, you must be proud, Paladin." I didn't haul him in. It was this other prick we got on the force. He called ICE. "You guys arguing about the unknown woman in the morgue?" "Yes," I said. "You saw the tracks inside her arms?" In fact, I had a lot of them. She'd been doing it for a long time. "Well," the cop said, "there's too much of that kind of shit going on in this town." I woke up in the back seat of my car. It was the end of September and it was cold. Business hadn't been going well there either, mostly running down stuff for nasty divorce lawyers. Once in a while, a missing person, which I called my specialty, Hector Candle Missing Persons. I could find anybody, living or dead. I could have found the long-gone Judge Crater if somebody paid me enough. Then I'd gotten a call from a TV writer for the soaps who said she'd hired a crew of Russian handymen to remodel her loft apartment up on West 80th. She breathed hard while she told me the story. I could hear her nostrils whistling. They'd left the job half done. "So call the Better Business Bureau," I said. "Listen, will you?" she snarled. She'd called the Russian handymen up and blistered their eardrums, and they'd promised to come back the next day and finish up. But after she hung up, she went to the deli for salami and onions, and her debit card bounced. So did her 2 credit cards. Right away, she guessed what had happened. They'd managed to suck all the juice out of her bank account and ran her credit cards to the brim. She had a nervous breakdown on the spot, and another one when she got back to her apartment. "It's that Russian mob, you know?" "You called the cops, right?" "Oh," she said, "they took my complaint. It's been 6 weeks. Nothing happens. Listen, I'm 70 fucking years old and I want to retire." She was right. Oh, I should have given you a trigger warning about these naughty words. She was writing for the TV soap, The Living End. She called her friend, the exec producer, and asked him if he knew any PIs. She said, "I want a real prick." He told her his ex-wife used a guy named Hector Candle, and that he'd like to slit his throat, but if she wanted a genuine SOB, he's your guy. I found those bastards. They were sucking other old people's accounts like ice cream sodas. I did most of it online. It wasn't hard. And I found them, I followed them around and made a regular photo album any crook would be proud of. I got 2 of them busted and I was working on a third when one night I woke hearing something that sounded like a dog scratching at my door. I was on the floor in 2 seconds, into my jacket and out with my Beretta. Both locks were turning. Damn, and I thought I was good with locks. The door swung open. He saw me and got off 1 shot that grazed my neck, but I put 2 slugs in his chest and painted the doorpost red like the first Passover. Anyway, I moved out of town as fast as my little wheels would carry me with my clothes and computer and a few books. A detective named Mackie Marcel, who came to the scene, told me I might want to invest in an igloo. See if you can find one on the moon. These guys are monsters and we can't protect you. I headed north. I stopped in Amsterdam, New York, and had spaghetti and sausage on a deck overlooking the Mohawk River and followed it with a double bourbon. I wanted to stop there. Something about the place felt right, although Amsterdam had all the markings of a dying city, but it was only a 3-hour drive from Manhattan. Too close. So the next morning I headed west. I passed Utica and Syracuse, and I was heading for Rochester when I pulled off for lunch in a prosperous town called Tyler, a little east of Kodak City. I liked the place. Who would look for me there? I bought my little yellow trailer on a 2-acre lot, woods on both sides, no shingle, no mailbox, no name or number on the door. I got my name out to some local attorneys and started divorce snooping, tracking absconders and bail jumpers and child custody stuff. Dirty, dirty, but no more hijinks. Now I slept with my Beretta and I had a 30-06 propped between my fridge and the kitchen counter, a 12-gauge shotgun under my couch, and my dad's old double barrel in my bedroom closet. My shades were drawn. After a couple years, I was puzzling why they'd never come after me, but I wasn't going to look into that either. By the way, the 2 monsters I got busted, they were acquitted. They're back home with their computers and their guns, their lovely wives and adorable kids, remodeling for other old people, but screw them. It was none of my business, not anymore. Thank you.
Yeah, this will work. Good evening. My name is Ivy, and I'm a 3rd semester student at the Solstice MFA program in creative writing, specifically in the YA and social action and writing track. For the past 2 semesters, I've had the pleasure of working with mentor, author, and parent David Yoo. And for the past 5 days, I have been lobbying every member of the Solstice team to work with him again. Sadly, my efforts have been futile. And the list is up, so there's really no hope. That's all right. And that's kind of the point here. To understand the oceanic capacity and beauty of David's feedback and mentorship, one needs to first understand clumsy, awkward sea turtle hatchlings. David appreciates a good tangent, I assure you. Sea turtles hatch, and it's as harrowing as black ice to watch, more so if you are a parent yourself. They dig themselves out of the sand and crawl unassisted toward the open ocean, where they still may not survive. Well-meaning tourists understandably want to assist the hatchlings, even lift them up and place them into crashing waves to assist them. They miss the point. The crawl is the important part. When sea turtle hatchlings crawl against the sand, grains like shattered stars rubbing against their fresh leather bellies and beliefs, they actually imprint the magnetic signature of the beach on them. It's like they create their new thumbprint of that beach, honing it, sharpening it, and defining it with each wobbling step. And decades later, they will return to that same beach to lay their own eggs in a safe place that's literally marked on their bodies. David will make you crawl. He'll place you on a safe beach of encouragement, dig you a nest of craft feedback. But then there's the intangible ambiguity, the space he allows for his students to find themselves, to create an imprint, a signature that is uniquely theirs. In packets, this might look like conversation or glossing over an obvious mistake in favor of pointing out a far more meaningful detail, or the compassionate comment, as Meg often says during orientation. David guides, creates a container of safety, and then leaves you to crawl for the rest. And that is where you as a writer make meaning. I imagine this is why David continues to find himself in programs like Solstice and the Gotham Writers Workshop, and why his works like The Detention Club and The Choke Artist, Confessions of a Chronic Underachiever, work so well. David creates space for his protagonists, for his students, and his narrators to reveal themselves. Then he amplifies their imprint, lets it become a beacon for risky, productive, human-centered work. The open ocean is as frightening as it is awe-inspiring, but I am less reluctant about navigating it as a writer because my 2 semesters with David have enabled me to imprint my own magnetic signature into my work and myself. Please join me in welcoming David Yoo.
Thank you so much, Ivy. You totally get me right now. That's how so I was at the student reading this afternoon, which was amazing. And yeah. One of you thought so also. Okay. But as I was sitting there listening to everyone, I realized belatedly that I've never offered a trigger warning before giving a reading. In my defense, I did offer a trigger warning right when I first learned to speak, but none of you were here for that. So I want to offer my first, just a general trigger warning, which I don't mean to be vague, but it could be anything. Okay, so this is the first half or first part of an essay I wrote a long time ago called Gangs of New England. I formed my first posse junior year of high school. There were 3 of us, me, my best friend Jay, and his best friend Chris. What initially brought us together was our mutual love of rap music. That and we were 3 of the bigger losers at Avon High. Previously, I'd been a member of the elite soccer crew. Just being on the team carried serious social cachet, but I didn't get along with the coach at all. And startlingly soon after quitting, I had a major falling out with my friends and found myself temporarily sitting by myself at lunch. I needed new compadres fast, and the only 2 guys in school who weren't part of an established clique already were Jay and Chris. They hung out by themselves because they didn't play sports, and on top of that, they were from the poor part of town. Or relatively poor, at least. Avon was absurdly wealthy, so to clarify, by poor, I mean squarely ensconced in the middle class. But within the utterly unrealistic microcosm of society that was Avon, they were the closest thing to burnouts at our school. As upperclassmen, they were still riding mongoose dirt bikes with plastic fluorescent green pegs on both sides of their back tires, practicing bunny hops and rail slides outside Chucky's food store on West Avon Road after school, just like they had back in middle school. Suffice it to say, socially, this was a giant step down for me, but I desperately needed a new crew, and they were my only viable option. I was stunned when I found out they listened to rap music, too. I tagged them as typical skate punks, whereas it made perfect sense that I would get obsessed with rap, since I was the closest thing to a black kid in town. Well, there actually was one real black kid, but definitely anytime he was out sick from school, I was easily the next best thing. Simply due to the fact that as a Korean kid, I was the only other male student of color within town limits. Every day after school and on weekends throughout the fall of junior year, Jay, Chris, and I would fanatically listen to rap and compose original songs. We transcribed all of our favorites by Run DMC, Ice-T, and the like into a 5-subject notebook, and then we'd take turns reciting Rock Box and Colors and Express Yourself back to each other. Since I was the ringleader, because I was the only member who could sort of beatbox, I got to come up with a name for our posse, D-Light. The D stood for Dave, of course. And the light was a reference to how all 3 of us were really skinny. I was positioning us to be the answer to the Fat Boys. At one point, I sincerely believed we were destined to take over the world. All we needed was a great demo tape. We kept the name until the actual group D-Light came out at the end of the school year, and we were forced to immediately drop it, shoving a frightened Frosh guy against the lockers and informing him, "Yo, you just got marked by D-Light, home slice." Didn't carry any menace to it anymore because merely saying our posse name now conjured up the dance club hit "Groove is in the Heart." Chris was psyched we had to ditch the name D-Light because he hated it from day one. He was way into gangster rap and constantly wore paisley do-rags that matched his Gap turtlenecks. And over Christmas break, he armed himself with a bunch of replica BB gun pistols he bought at Service Merchandise. I'll give him his props. Chris was easily the closest thing to a legitimate thug in our hometown. But that wasn't saying much, given Avon's aforementioned standing as an affluent lily-white suburb nestled in the financially fertile Farmington Valley of Connecticut. He memorized every line of every song in NWA's Straight Outta Compton, and in retrospect was part of the very first generation of suburban white boys who listened to gangster rap and felt comfortable pretending they were black because there weren't any real black kids around. Jay was the best breakdancer of the trio, so we nicknamed him JoJo Dancer, which he obviously hated. He could do all the old school breakdancing moves, which at the time I suppose were relatively new school, to perfection. Jay was a true disciple of MC Hammer long before the rapper became a preacher. He temporarily felt unmoored the night he finally saw Hammer in concert at the Hartford Civic Center. Vanilla Ice had opened up the show, and it turned out he was an even better dancer. At D-Light's creative peak sophomore year, I'd sit in my dad's lazy boy on a Friday night and beatbox while Chris stood on the sofa angrily rapping my lyrics as Jay vigorously did the worm back and forth. We probably could have won the Avon High Talent Show junior year if we'd had the collective nuts to perform our material. Given my undeserved tag as a typical brainy Asian nerd, I was known among the posse members, at least, as the cerebral one, not only because I was mistakenly presumed to be a genius, but also because I discovered A Tribe Called Quest and De La Soul, and I worshipped KRS-One's skills as a wordsmith. I spent hours and hours every night penning my own raps instead of doing my homework. Most of my raps started with the phrase, "My name is D Smooth, and I've got a story to tell." I used a lot of tennis metaphors in my unique brand of depressingly realistic, cautionary suburban tales about topics ranging from getting unfairly profiled as a bad element by mall security, acquiring the food poisoning from sampling undercooked orange chicken at the food court, to the nearly indescribable heartache of losing yet another brother to private school. When I look back on us now from a bird's eye view, I realize we were considered jokes at school, but we each had our reasons for wanting to be gangsters, especially me. Pretty much the second my family moved back to the States from Seoul, Korea in the summer before third grade, I immediately started developing what would eventually, by the time I reached high school, turn into a full-blown, deep-seated ambivalence toward my ethnicity. This was due to the simple fact that in Avon, I was the token Asian guy, and basically my entire adolescence was spent trying to not be seen as different. Back when I was in elementary school, anytime friends were due to visit, I desperately tried to remove all traces of my family's heritage inside our house, figuring it was obvious enough that we were Korean. Why shove it in their faces like that? Mom was perpetually at her wit's end trying to get me to clean my room, but the prospect of having a sleepover would bring out the Mary Poppins in me, as I'd secretly cart all the ancient family heirlooms down into the basement. I'd pull together the fancy rice paper wall in my dad's office and stuff it in the closet, take down any framed pictures of us in traditional Korean hanbok outfits, sliding them under the sofa in the living room. The ring of the doorbell was downright Pavlovian, as I'd race to the kitchen to abscond with a big stinky jar of kimchi from the fridge and take it to the bathroom and then methodically stuff cold handfuls down the toilet. Going anywhere in public with my friends was an exercise in subterfuge as I tried to be invisible, unwittingly trying to be a ninja, hoping to God no kids from other towns would realize an Asian kid was in their vicinity and hurl slurs in my direction. But they always saw me, and they always did. And eventually I stopped going to the mall with my friends completely. To make matters worse, I had the added misfortune of starting high school in the late 1980s in New England, which in hindsight has to be considered the worst time in history to be an Asian American boy growing up in a white bread town like the one I grew up in, because people seem to have only two Asian guys in their lives, me and Long Duck Dong from 16 Candles. Anytime a stranger saw me at McDonald's or the library or wherever, I was fairly certain a gong was going off in their heads. I just didn't see myself as a typical Asian kid. I was aware, of course, that I looked Korean, but I didn't believe, despite all indications to the contrary, that I looked quite as Asian as other blatantly Asian kids. And it actually confused me in history class when I read in a sorely outdated textbook a reference to Asian people having yellow skin. While I may have been deluded in how people saw me, surely I wasn't colorblind, too. I was suddenly mortified that I would one day wake up with yellow skin. So I started regularly conducting a homemade test whenever the thought came to me, where I drew a line on my forearm with a yellow highlighter. The rationale being that if one day I couldn't see the line, then the prophecy had come true. I figured self-loathing Native American kids probably had it even worse. If they wanted to do the test, they'd have to scribble red marker all over their arms. In an effort to buck the stereotype that I was a brainy Asian nerd, I refused to study and proceeded to get terrible grades in school. My parents were aghast at my crappy report cards, and for the bulk of my adolescence, the only phrase they ever said to me in Korean was, "Aigu jugeta." In Korean, "aigu" means, "oh God," and "jugeta" means, "you're killing me." They started taking me to the Korean church in West Hartford as a form of therapy via osmosis. The theory being that by immersing me with cliché successful Korean kids for an hour every Sunday, their immigrant work ethic and submissively obedient nature would magically rub off on me. One Sunday at the Korean church, I actually asked the full-blown Korean kids, as politely as possible, if they could tell that I looked less Asian than them. And they explained to me that I was a Twinkie, white on the inside, yellow on the outside. I'd never heard the term before, and it immediately made perfect sense. It was intended to be derogatory, but it actually opened my eyes, no pun intended, just to hear the definition. The more I thought about it, the more accurate the tag seemed. I was a Twinkie, and goddamn proud of it. That day I started realizing just how deep-seated and unconscious my self-hatred and desire to not be Asian really was. It wasn't normal to have an incomprehensible hatred of pandas, laundromats, and anything made of silk. This revelation didn't change my... Oh, God. So I was just talking to John. I can't pronounce this. Modus operandi? Is that how you say it? Oh, great. Thanks. Anyway, in the slides, however, man, I'm going to start over. No. And I continued defining myself by proudly being the polar opposite of all the traditional Asian stereotypes, to the dismay of my parents and teachers. This strategy was painfully misguided, to say the least, and as a teenager, I was one of those kids who was basically caught between two cultures, no matter what I did to try to remedy the situation. I was overtly Asian to my classmates and strangers at the mall, and not nearly Asian enough to my parents and the members of the Korean church. My greatest aspiration in life was not to become a pro athlete or a doctor or a rock star, but simply to have dull brown hair and dangerously fair skin. Looking Asian, I reasoned, was a physical handicap that hurt my chances of becoming popular in the same way other people's physical handicaps killed their chances of climbing the social ladder. My Asian face was no different from the girl with a gigantic purple splotch on her forehead, or the freckly redhead in homeroom who was mercilessly tortured for vaguely resembling Eric Stoltz. But no matter what I did, everyone still saw me as the token Asian guy. And by the time junior year started, I realized I had to find other ways to change how people saw me, which is to say that if I couldn't be seen as white, then being black was the next best thing. And therefore, embracing rap and descending into thug life was a natural fit. It was in the spring of junior year when our shit got dark. It was inevitable that our posse would take a turn down this cul-de-sac. We saw the movies Boys in the Hood, New Jack City, and Menace to Society, and Jay and I finally became enthralled with the gangster rap that Chris had always been privy to, symbolized by the act of Jay taking down his Kid and Play poster and replacing it with an EPMD poster. Having bought into the gangsta aesthetic as well, I went out and purchased a replica 9mm air gun at Surface Merchandise. along with a year's supply of CO2 cartridges. I mastered shooting Coke cans in my backyard after school using a sideways grip. I started wearing my LS tennis warm-ups, including the shiny, crinkle nylon sweatpants, to school every day. And I ransacked my mom's jewelry box for thick gold chains, but she didn't have any. So one day I wore Chris's grandmother's emerald brooch to school. And well, let's just say it did not have the desired effect. As a result of our descent into pseudo-thuggery, Chris grabbed the reins of leadership from me. That year, we spent our weekends tooling around in his dad's somewhat pimpish gold Mercury Cougar and blared Public Enemy out the tinny-back speakers, giving ourselves tinnitus every night. Chris wore out his dad's set of all-weather tires, riding the gas and brakes simultaneously to simulate hydraulic shocks as he manually made the car rise and pitch forward like some drunken metal beast whenever we rolled through the McDonald's parking lot on Route 44. He taught Jay and me how to drive like gangsters. Just push the seat all the way back, lean your head against the window, cock your baseball cap sideways, fist the wheel with your right elbow locked, supporting your chin with your left hand as you occasionally nod along to the beat with your lips pursed. We acted tough and within town lines felt like authentic gangbangers. One night we tormented a Westminster prep school alum in a hunter green Volvo 740 wagon who'd made the unfortunate error of flashing us for not having our headlights on, which we'd intentionally killed, of course, as we came from the opposite direction. Chris slammed on the brakes and clipped the curb as we spun around and proceeded to redline it after her. We alternated between tailing her and swerving alongside her and leaning on the horn all the way down Arch Street. At the stop sign, Jay lobbed a medium-sized McDonald's strawberry shake like a grenade, and it splattered all over her back window, covering up her older sibling's small liberal arts college stickers. She was so terrified she peeled out into oncoming traffic and nearly got totaled. A few minutes later, we stopped at a red light and realized the car next to us was the same woman in the Volvo. She was glaring at us, seeing that we were just obnoxious, pimply high school kids. I rolled down the window. "Sorry about that, ma'am. Our bad," I said sheepishly. She shot me the bird, and when the light turned green, we sat there for several extra seconds, allowing her to take off first. "That was wick, wick, whack," Jay said, adding, "and I don't mean that in a good way." Thank you.
All right. Can we have one more round of applause for Jennifer, Steve, and David?